Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of The World Today, where we bring you the latest news updates from around the world. I'm Rehan Morsi, and I'm joined this afternoon by Mr. Abdul Latif Wahabi, journalist. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Let's start with our first news item from Al-Ahram Online. It reads, Egypt fully supports Iraqi government after Baghdad's Qarada and Shab attacks. The news item reads, Egypt's foreign ministry strongly condemned early Sunday's terror attack in the Qarada and Shab areas of Baghdad that killed almost 90 people and injured over 210. The foreign ministry spokesman assured that Egypt stands by and fully supports the Iraqi government in the fight against terrorism, which targets its security and stability. The ministry statement read, noting that Egypt sends its condolences to the Iraqi people and government. The spokesman also reiterated Egypt's stance that terrorism contradicts all the humanitarian principles and that the end of the phenomenon relies on international solidarity to crack down on financing and militant ideology. How do you see this? In recent times, the president's office has been very active when it comes to neighbors. It has sent messages, personal messages to President Mahmoud Abbas and now in Iraq. Yeah. How do you see these messages?
Yeah, of course, as you know, that stability in Middle East, especially in the Arab world, means stability for all the countries in the area. As you know that terrorism now penetrated all over the world and also threatened all the economic, the political goals of any country. Of course, as you know that during last week we saw that what happened in Ataturk or in Istanbul airport, for example, and this is a scenario. It means that terrorism may touch any part in the world. Of course, Egypt, after the Iraqi government managed to enter Fallujah and also to set the people and the inhabitant of this area free again. And as you know that they committed, I mean, the militias and the Daesh group committed human crimes in this area. And after the success, Egypt, as you know, that Minister of Foreign Affairs visited Baghdad, and also met with the Prime Ministers, present Egyptian congratulations for the Iraqi government. Although that, as you heard, that some foreigners or some opponents and for Egypt, they criticized the visit itself as Egypt praised the Iraqi efforts against Daesh, and they blamed Egypt for not criticizing the Hashd or the militia. The Iraqi government used them in their endeavors to help the Fallujah people.
But the Iraqi government, the presidency statement spoke about how to combat militancy through actually stopping funding reaching them. How is this possibly done?
As you know that we will discover maybe in next month that some foreign regimes and the government financed the military groups in some Arab world. As you know, this is of course, as you know, that Egypt criticized all the world effort if it didn't take procedures against how to dry the financial aids for these groups in the area.
Okay, let's move on to the next news item we have from the Gulf today that reads, all located human remains from Egypt Air MS-804 recovered. The news item itself reads, all human remains located at the site of the Egypt Air Flight MS-804 crash in the Mediterranean Sea were recovered by Egyptian and French forensic experts aboard the vessel John Lethbird, the Egyptian Investigative Committee said on Sunday. The vessel is a transit to Alexandria, where the human remains will be delivered to prosecution and forensic authorities in the presence of investigative committee members before being transported to the forensic authority in Cairo for DNA tests. John Lethbridge, which was contracted by the Egyptian government to search the plane debris, flight recorders, and human remains, will continue to search the crash site in order to confirm no other remains are left behind, according to a statement released by the investigative committee. The 2 flight recorders were retrieved from the sea last month. Data from the flight's data recorder is being decoded in Cairo after it was repaired in France. Preliminary information confirms smoke on board the flight before it crashed into the sea. At the very beginning of this accident, they spoke that it is more likely a terrorist attack than it is a technical fault. But today, we're talking about smoke on board the plane. Does this still mean that there's a possibility it's a terrorist attack?
As you know, that Minister of Civil Aviation and Investigations team,
Yes.
They declared before that all the possibilities are taken into considerations. First, they said a terrorist attack on the plane, and the other said explosions and so on. But after Egypt located and decided the 2 black boxes of the flight in the Mediterranean, they picked it, and also fortunately in a good conditions, they repaired, and they took also the memory unit of the voice recorder, cockpit voice recorder, and the flight data recorder at the same time, and they fixed them exactly. And I think during May days or the coming days, they will pick out the data of the 2 black boxes or of the 2 recorders. This is, of course, will give all the indications for what happened in to the flight itself. As you know, that when they got the debris of the plane itself, they found that some assault and smoke in the cockpit, maybe high temperatures, maybe anything else. So all the possibilities, they took it into considerations.
Assuming, for instance, if it isn't a terrorist attack and it is actually a technical fault, will Egypt Air be responsible for the technical fault, or is it the Charles de Gaulle Airport that's responsible?
I think that the airport of taking off will be responsible for what happened for the plane. We have to compare this flight with the Russian jet, for example. So I think that after picking all the data of the 2 voice recorders, I think they can reach to a conclusion for what happened really for the airplane itself.
Okay, let's move on to the next news item from the World Bulletin that reads, Israel announces plans for hundreds of new settler homes. The news item itself reads, the Israeli government has announced plans to build 800 new homes for Israeli settlers in and around occupied East Jerusalem. The Israeli daily newspaper Haaretz reported Sunday night. The plans, which include 560 housing units in the Ottoman settlement in the occupied West Bank, were approved by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu late Sunday before he set out for a 5-day tour of Africa. On Friday, the government also announced plans to resume the process of building 42 homes in the Kiryat Arba settlement. The move came one day after a 13-year-old girl was stabbed to death inside this settlement. In reaction to the stabbing, Netanyahu pledged to strengthen Israeli settlements across the West Bank. Israeli human rights groups Peace Now, which monitors settlement building, criticized the move. There is no justifications for violence, and recent deadly attacks on Israelis must be condemned in the strongest possible terms, the group's statement said. How do you see these settlements? I don't think it's a response for the stabbing, but it's more of a technique used by the Israelis to make things difficult when it comes to negotiations.
Yeah, of course, especially after President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi discussed and declared that or presented another initiative for the Israeli cabinet to reach a solutions for peace process in the Middle East. As you know, this step put the Israeli cabinet, even Netanyahu himself, in a problem, in a dilemma, because all the foreigners, I mean France, for example, United Nations and the United States welcomed at the same time the initiative of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi.
Yes.
And this, of course, this step revived the old step of the Arab League. Yes. Of the Arab Initiative peace process at the same time. But now, as you know, that since they declared and the France also supported the invitations for a peace process in the Middle East, as you know, that Israeli cabinet put Netanyahu and his power at the same times in a danger when they declared or resuming the settlement policy in the Palestinian land. Of course, this, as you know, that the United States, France, for example, and also the United Nations criticized Israel for this steps for resuming a settlement policy again.
But that doesn't stop them from doing this anyway.
Yeah. But as you know that when they entered in a serious negotiations, you have to notice that they entered in negotiations on one hand, and they use all the tools in the other hand. I mean, in fighting the Palestinian, for example, in launching or resuming the settlement policy again in the area. This is, of course, to prove or to declare they have a power in negotiations. Yeah.
I mean, if the Israeli side does not want to negotiate with the Palestinians, no one can really force them into anything.
Yeah, but as you know that they came to a negotiations under international pressures, and this is of course to make the peace process invalid in the current time. As you know that at the same time they are waiting for the new administrations in the United States, especially Trump.
But no one really actually, says anything to Israel. I mean, there have been several UN resolutions, for instance, condemning Israeli aggression towards the Palestinians and war crimes, including Tzipi Livni, who is wanted for questioning over these issues. So who's going to first?
Because they are out of the power just now. But if they were in power, I mean Livni and the others opponents in power, they will take the same policy at the same time, and Netanyahu will be the opponent for them, for example.
Okay, let's move on to the next news item we have from the Gulf today. That reads, Lavrov, Kerry calls to discuss Syria conflict. The news item itself reads, Russia and the United States held fresh talks on ways of cooperating to end the 5-year conflict in Syria, as intensive Syrian government airstrikes killed at least 40 civilians in a town northeast of Damascus. Moscow and Washington are seeking ways of brokering an end to a conflict that has killed more than 400,000 people, according to the United Nations, and has sent a wave of refugees streaming towards Europe. In the latest diplomatic contact between the two powers, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry spoke by phone on Saturday, Russia's foreign ministry said. They discussed the possibility of a Russian-American cooperation in the fight against terrorists, a group in Syria. The statement did not identify the groups more closely. Russia, which supports President Bashar al-Assad, is conducting airstrikes against various armed groups and are opposed to his rule, including Nusra Front, an offshoot of Al-Qaeda, and Daesh, which the Americans also oppose. But Washington says Moscow is also targeting moderate rebel groups which are ideologically opposed to Qaeda, which are supported by the United States. The fighting continued unabated in Syria with intensive strikes by the Syrian Air Force in Jairud, northeast of Damascus, which killed 43 civilians a day after the reported execution of a Syrian Air Force pilot, according to the monitors and rebels there. How do you see this? Do you really believe that the Russians and Americans will find some sort of middle ground when it comes to fighting?
No, but I think that the game will maybe change it in the coming months, especially after the resuming negotiations between Turkey and Russia, for example.
Yes. What does that mean?
Yeah. Of course, as you know that now, yesterday, Turkey declared that they will join the Russian forces in their attacks in Syria against Daesh, and also they declared that the Russian can use Angarlik military base in Turkey for their warplanes against and the airplanes against or air attacks against Daesh in Syria. I think the game will be maybe changed in the coming months. As you know, Turkey at the same time needs completely the Russian efforts in Syria, and also need the Russian economic relations at the same time. As you know that after the direct contact between the Turkish president and the Russian president, Russia declared that they permit for the tour operators for the air flights and so on to go between the two countries again. I think.
But why the change of heart, though? I mean, why did Turkey decide that they want to cooperate with Russia again, even though there was tension for months
because
after
they are seeking for their economic and political goals in the area.
Is this because of the Ataturk attack?
Yeah, of course. And this is and as since what happened for between when they crashed the Russian air or Russian jet at the same time, I think the Turkish tourism lost the great portions of revenues coming from the Russian tourists to Turkey at the same time. And as you know that all the Turkish companies working in overseas and Russia, they practice some pressures on the Turkish cabinet to resume or to reach a reconciliation for what happened between Turkey and Russia at the same time.
Okay, finally we have a news item from the Daily Star of Lebanon that reads, Saudi Arabia intercepts ballistic missiles from Yemen, according to the coalition. The news item itself reads, Saudi Arabia intercepted a ballistic missile that Yemeni rebels fired towards the kingdom's southern city of Abba earlier today. The Riyadh-led coalition fighting the insurgents said it was intercepted with no injuries. The coalition said in a statement, adding that the missile launchers were destroyed by Saudi air defenses. It was at least the fourth ballistic missile launched across the border since UN-brokered peace talks began in Kuwait in April by Yemen's Houthi rebels and the government of President Abdurrahman Mansour Hadi. Fighting has continued despite a formal ceasefire in conjunction with the peace talks. The Houthis, which Saudi Arabia says are backed by Iran, are allied with elite troops loyal to Yemen's former President Ali Abdullah Saleh. They overran Yemen's capital in 2014 before moving to other parts of the country, prompting the coalition to intervene with airstrikes and other support in March last year. How do you see the ballistic missiles that were intercepted? At some point, Yemen had calmed down slightly. Is this an escalation again into the violence? Or?
Yeah, but I think that Houthis is trying to declare that they are still strong in Yemen, and they have a foothold on the ground at the same time, especially after what happened in Kuwait negotiations between the two rivals under the umbrella of the Gulf Council and so on. As you know that the international community with the United Nations at the same time criticized the Houthi for not going to Kuwait with a serious solutions for the Yemeni problem. I think after Al-Eid, they will resume negotiations again, but as you know that the Houthi in Yemen is trying from time to time to declare or to prove that they are still in power in the Yemen land itself.
What about the negotiations? Do you think that these negotiation process will actually be fruitful somehow?
I think that the Arab countries and the Arab League and also the United Nations will practice pressures on the Houthi themselves to accept all the articles of the initiatives. As you know that the Houthi was completely supported by Iran, for example, and some of the other countries like Lebanon, Hezbollah, and also others.
But don't you think that at some point the negotiations will actually have to directly involve Iran?
Yeah, but as you know that if they resumed the negotiations again, I think they didn't accept. I mean, the Arab, the Kuwait and the Gulf Council will not accept any preconditions for the Houthis themselves. I think they will pack the governmental negotiations or Yemeni governmental negotiations in Kuwait again.
Okay, well, unfortunately, this brings us to the end of this episode of The World Today. But stay tuned for more updates on Nile TV.